It's Barbara here. We're just sort of getting ready and starting. So yep, we'll be kicking off in about 2. Who have we got at Law Partners? Can you put your camera on or your microphone? Hi there.
Hello.
Oh, hi.
Hi. So we have a few staff who will be joining.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So I'll just need to get and let them know that we'll start soon.
That's all great. Okay. Oh, that's good. Well, look, before you do, you've disappeared. I was just going to say, before you do, I will ask you to pop your microphone on mute again because people are just joining. So no, that's all good. That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Hey, Tyrone. Hello, Tyrone. Welcome along. Tyrone, we're just waiting for people to arrive to join in. Hey, Solomon Islands. Welcome along.
Hi, Barbara. It's me.
Hey, Naomi. I guess it's you, Naomi. I can't see your photo, but it's good to have you on board. How's things?
Yeah, good. Everything's all right. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Hey, oh, there you go. Hi. Hi, everyone at Law Partners. I can see you all coming in now. I recognise that room.
Yes, how are you?
Good, good. Thank you. How's it going there?
It's paradise, so can't complain.
Oh, don't say that. It was paradise here too, but we're not in lockdown. We're all good.
Oh, that's good to hear.
Yeah. Oh, cool. And Samoa, Tyrone, how's Samoa? No, I don't think Tyrone can hear me. Oh, we've got a few people joining. That's cool. We'll be starting in another 5 minutes or so. So, yep, that's good. We'll see how many we get today. You must have a big screen in Vanuatu there at Law Partners. Hey, Ernest, welcome along. I think we're getting a good Samoan contingent today. Must be because of you, Liz.
Oh, good day, Barbara.
Hi, how are you doing, Ernest?
Oh, well here, except for the rain.
Oh, you got rain. Okay. Oh, well, that's good. We could do with a bit of rain here in Auckland. We're just waiting for a few more people. We start at 2 o'clock. I know the time difference is always quite tricky for people. We sometimes have people join at 1 o'clock and then others join at 3, and because the time is so different across the Pacific, it's difficult for people to to get in with it. But New Zealand time is what we stick with. I see we've got Business Link Vanuatu. Is that you, Yvonne? And PNG.
Hi, everyone. Yes, Barbara, it's me.
Oh, nice to see you join us. Thank you very much. And Apio, I think you've joined us too.
You're welcome.
Fantastic.
Welcome.
Good stuff. Hey there, I think we've got Julie as well. Hello, Julie. Welcome along. Thanks for joining us today. Again, you're a regular.
Hi, Julie. Hi from Law Partners.
We're going to get going in another few moments or two, just waiting for people to join in. So, yep, we'll just give it a few more moments. No worries about your camera, Chlorine. We'll be asking people to turn their cameras and microphones off once we get started anyway. So that's all good. Hopefully you guys are starting to get to know your way around Google Meet in terms of the features, you know, the chat box, etc. Hi there.
So I've turned off my camera.
Oh, thank you.
And
okay, no, that's all good.
because that'll save some stuff. And will I turn off my microphone now?
Well, whenever you're ready, we'll be starting shortly. So we will ask people to do that when we start. Yeah, that's all good. No, thank you, Julie. Hello, Kevin.
Okay.
Oh, Deepika and Richard, I see you've joined us. You've just snuck in there and I didn't notice. Welcome along. Thanks for joining, team. That's cool. We're just waiting for a few more people to come and then we'll make a start. Nice to see you, Richard. And you, Deepika, of course. Okie dokie. All right. Well, look, I think we'll make a start. So, kia ora tātou. Hello, everyone. Bulavanaka, Tulawhalava, kia orana, hara o keta, and a warm welcome to this Business Link Pacific webinar. I think this is number 4 in our current series on business advisor skills. My name's Barbara Wilkinson, and I am BLP's Professional Development Advisor. So one of my roles at BLP is to support business advisors with the skills that they need to provide high quality advisory services. And so it's my pleasure to host the second webinar series, which focuses on that, all on business advisor skills. So in this series, we look at the range of skills and knowledge that business advisors need, and we share experiences on what it takes to be a business advisor. So last time, for those of you that joined us, you'll recall, we looked at coaching and training skills. So a recording of that is now available on the BLP portal, so you can go and have a look at that if you missed it, or if you want to go back and check on a few things. We've also looked at the legal knowledge that business advisors should have. as well as interpreting financial reports, which again is another very important skill for business advisors. So in today's session, I'm joined by Liz Ahi from Fine Mac Creative in Samoa, and she's going to be talking to us today about the communication skills that business advisors need. And this is a very important skill and a very fundamental skill for business advisors, and one that we really should not take for granted. We all need to continuously work on and reflect on our communication skills if we want to be effective business advisors. So these are the aspects of communication that we're going to be looking at today. Liz is going to share her expertise, and she's going to discuss ways to ensure that you communicate effectively, because communicating effectively is the way to build those long-lasting relationships with your clients. So it's absolutely critical. So we're also going to share some tips on presenting information to groups, and also share some ways that you can ensure your written communication is effective. And then we're also going to discuss ways that you can handle those difficult conversations that you sometimes need courage for. But firstly, let me quickly guide you through the format for the webinar today, and also like to give you a bit of an update on BLP's activities. So in terms of the format for today, please can I ask you now to put your microphones and cameras on mute if you haven't done so already. So now that we've started, this really helps us to ensure that we've got a good connection for everyone. Please feel free though throughout the webinar to ask questions by using the chat box, which is located in the top right hand side in that little message icon. We do welcome your thoughts and we welcome your comments throughout the webinar, and there will be some specific times for questions, and at the end there'll also be an opportunity to turn your cameras back on and have a bit of a chat with us. Now we're recording the webinar today, so you can also access it afterwards if you want to recap on anything, or if you want to let others know about this webinar, they'll be able to look at it too. It's going to be saved on the BLP website where all our webinars are saved, so you can go back and review them at any stage. So for those of you who aren't too familiar with BLP, here's a very quick rundown of what Business Link Pacific is all about and some of our recent achievements. So BLP is funded by the New Zealand government. It's a private sector development initiative, and it's delivered by DT Global. We enable SMEs, that's small and medium-sized enterprises, to find advisory services in our network through our searchable database. They can then benefit from our subsidy scheme that helps them to access approved advisors' services by subsidising those advisory services. So all BLP approved advisors go through our competency assessment to verify that they have the experience and skills needed to provide high quality advice. And so that way SMEs can be confident in the services that they receive from a BLP approved advisor. Because all of those approved advisors have been through our quality assurance process. We know that being able to access expert advisors really makes a difference to SMEs, to small businesses. It really helps them to grow and develop so much more than if they're working on their own without professional advice. Now recently we've launched the BLP Finance Facility, and our first round of grant applications has closed off, and we're currently evaluating those, and we've had lots of applicants, so it's been quite a big job reviewing all of those. So that's quite a big piece of work. We're now also operating in 8 countries. We've recently added Tonga and Kiribati to our network, so we're now in Cook Islands, Fiji, Kiribati, PNG, Samoa, Solomon Islands, Tonga and Vanuatu. We've got a number of online tools for SMEs, such as our Business Health Check and the Business Continuity Planner, and they're there to help SMEs identify areas where they may need support. And of course, we offer professional development and support to our network of advisors through our Business Advisor Development Program, our webinar series, such as this one, our podcast series, and we also offer customised support to individual business advisor service providers. So that's a little bit about what we do. Since starting in 2018, BLP has subsidised well over 500 businesses to access advisory services in our network, and that support has really made a difference to their growth. As you can see from this slide, we've had over 1,600 businesses use our online tools, and again, they found those really helpful. And we've now actually got well over 120 advisory firms in our network, with over 160 individually approved advisors with various areas of technical expertise to support SME growth. So that's a little bit about BLP. I'd now like to welcome Liz Ahi to the session. Liz was born in Samoa. She's been raised in New Zealand. She's from the villages of Safotu and Aola, I hope I've pronounced those correctly, in Savaii in Samoa. She's a communications, public relations and content marketing consultant, and she specialises in the fields of agriculture, tourism and travel. She's also previously worked as a freelance journalist for the Samoa Observer, and she's a regular contributor to the Samoa Global News, the Pacific Living magazine and the Coconut TV. So Liz graduated from Victoria University in Wellington. She's got a BA in Political Science and International Relations. And she's now returned home to Samoa, and since then she's developed an absolute passion for the development of tourism and agriculture sectors in Samoa. And this is particularly after she's heard so many stories that these sectors which show just how underappreciated and unreported businesses were. So, and that's predominantly been through a lack of marketing, which is of course her expertise. So she's a big believer in the power of content marketing, and she considers it's a key element of any winning communications, PR and social media strategy. So Liz, welcome along. Welcome to today's webinar. Thank you so much for joining us and for agreeing to share your expertise today. It's great having you here. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks so much, Barbara. I really appreciate this opportunity to be able to have an experience and sharing my knowledge on this platform. So yeah, looking forward to chatting with everyone and having a conversation.
Oh no, that's great. Thank you so much. Hey, Liz, just tell us a little bit. It sounds like you offer a whole range of marketing and communications and PR services. Can you tell us a little bit more about what services you do offer at FindMat Creative? And actually, can you explain as well what your business name signifies?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, at the heart of everything that I do, and I've done, I've pursued a diverse careers in my lifetime already. But at the heart of it is I am a creative and a storyteller. So FindMat Creative just really signifies me being a creative and a storyteller, because most Samoans will know that a FindMat or a Ietonga, as they're known in Samoa, are highly regarded. They're these are fine woven mats, and they're highly prized and sought after cultural measina, which means treasure. There's a lot of knowledge and skill and patience and love that goes into making these fine mats, and that's how I approach storytelling. So to me, I believe every fine mat has a memory and carries experience and emotions of the weaver. So whoever receives the gift of a fine mat, and the fact that a fine mat can be passed on multiple times through a generation, to me, if only fine mats could speak, they would tell us the stories of where they've travelled. So I see myself as a weaver of words into stories, and for every story I produce or help tell, I believe I'm weaving a much bigger fine mat that's going to eventually tell my story. So that's at the heart of what I do. And how that comes out is I help people to develop communication strategy that's tailored to their businesses or to their organizations. So using my skills in journalism, I help to produce press releases, and I've done that for many different and diverse businesses and organizations. I also help increase the visibility of companies and organizations in print and digital media. I've also managed crisis communications, and in Samoa that happens a lot. So that's also been a passion of mine, actually. I actually really enjoy getting into the thick of it, especially if there's a PR crisis. And then finally, I provide copywriting, content marketing, social media management, which is actually what I started off with when I left the Samoa Observer. Yeah, so basically helping my clients tell their stories, and yeah.
Wow, I love that analogy of the mat, and that's just such a great analogy and a great way, because you know a weaver is a really talented person, and you do need those skills equally to make a mat as you do to write content or to communicate. So you know it is a really really great analogy. Okay, so let's get started on our first topic. So Liz, can I ask you, how would you describe the communication skills that business advisors need? You know, what are these communication skills exactly?
Sure, I think that one of there's so many important skills to have, but the top ones are having empathy and active listening, leadership, self-awareness and self-management, especially in understanding your biases, and also knowing how to influence and persuade to be able to get, you know, to produce something. Right.
Yeah. So why do you think these skills are so important for business advisors?
Because we're in the business of people. That's why it's so important. And so we have to get out of our own way sometimes, and remember that, you know, we're dealing with the hearts and minds of people. So, which is why I've always been someone that's valued emotional intelligence above all skills and experiences, because everything else I believe can be learned. Anything that's technical, I believe that I can learn. So, and I believe that other people can learn technical things too, but it's very hard to develop emotional intelligence. So if you already come with it, that's great. But I think that there's hope for you. I think you can still develop things like empathy and self-awareness.
Yeah. That's so important, and you're absolutely right. You know, at the end of the day, you know, this is about relationships with other human beings. So you're right, people are so important. So perhaps firstly, then we can think about empathy. You mentioned, you know, that's one of the top things. So do you think though that is one of those skills that you've either got it or you don't? You know, do you think that is a learnable skill really, or is it more about, you know, having a personality, a personality attribute? You're either empathetic or you're not. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's both. You can be born with it and learn it, because you know, especially like for example, you know, I have people who I'm friends with that they're not they've described to me that they're not natural mothers, but they've learned how to be mothers through the example of their own mums or other mother figures in their family. So it's about modeling after someone that's influenced you in your life. So if you can be a mentor to somebody, they can learn empathy. I believe it's sometimes even in my own experiences in Samoa, even though there's you know, there's so much humility and compassion that I've come across in Samoa, but I still believe that empathy is something that's not quite developed yet, and it's one of the reasons why I think we're still lagging behind in customer service. But I still think that just by me being myself and learning and showing the other person that I'm listening and that I'm caring about them beyond them being a work colleague, I believe that that's demonstrating empathy, and eventually if you're consistent with it, other people are going to learn from you and pick that up as a good skill to have.
No, that's such great words of wisdom that you've given us there, and I really like what you've got on the slide there about how you can learn empathy. So, being curious and being interested in that other person, that person-to-person contact, that's really important. That's the starting point for cultivating empathy. Actually seeking out people who might be different from you is a great way to get to think about different perspectives, and then acknowledging those differences and commonalities, and thinking about what you would be if you were in their shoes. I think there's some real deliberate things that you can do to cultivate empathy in the way that you work, and of course listening skills becomes a really, really central communication skill for business advisors. So what can a business advisor do to make sure that their listening skills are really well developed? What does it really take to actively listen?
To actively listen, and this is something that I've learned during my career as a journalist. Listening is absolutely key, and the first thing you got to do is you got to concentrate and keep your eye on the subject in front of you, paying attention. Often clients ask, trust me enough to speak on their behalf or craft their media statements because they know I'm in tune with who they are, what they stand for, and what their message is. And that's really come about because of my ability to just tune in and focus on the person that's speaking. The other things that really that help is try not to judge, have an open mind when you're listening, because you can learn something too. I don't think that just because you're the expert that you should always, you should go in there thinking that you know everything, because chances are you're gonna learn as much about something as the other person. So the other thing is asking open questions. That's really important in interviewing to help you learn more about the client and what their needs are. So things like paraphrasing and clarifying, repeating the question back to them is always helpful to both you and the client, so you can stay on topic and also let the client know that you are really listening and trying to understand.
Yeah, because that's so important, isn't it? Because sometimes we think we know what they mean, and we think we've heard it right, but we all hear it with a different set of ears, right? So it's really important to clarify, to ask those clarifying questions and paraphrase back what we think we've heard. And often you get a more rounded understanding when you do that, don't you?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, that's certainly, because you're not talking to a brick wall, you're talking to another human being. So a lot of give and take, and you just think about what they're really saying. How I have fine-tuned my listening skills is through recording myself, having an interview with a client. Wow. And usually, and that's for me and that's been so helpful, because I've identified times where I've interrupted, I wasn't listening because I repeated the same question like down the line, so that's made me really aware. Self-awareness is so important so that you can go back and you can improve on what you've learned. I'm not saying that you should go out and record everything that you do. You can, but you make sure that you let your client know. Yeah, but it is really helpful in just self-reviewing and just identifying your shortfalls a little bit. The other thing is, when I'm how I show active listening is I'm aware of my body language, and that it's also sending signals and sending messages. So You know, I fully give and I'm fully present when I'm talking with somebody or interviewing them and listening to them. And on the other side of things, I'm constantly reading other people's body language to get clues on whether they're receptive or not to what I'm saying. And also, yeah, just being in general, make the client feel comfortable.
Yeah.
So have a conversation in the beginning, nothing too stressful, just something lighthearted just to get you started.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that sounds great. And it's true, isn't it? Like our body language, it says such a lot about us. It you know, it gives away quite a lot, and that's what makes this platform so difficult to work with.
That's very true. Because sometimes you feel you're just talking to yourself.
Yeah.
It's just me. Yeah.
And I mean, I recognize for myself, you know, like sometimes when I'm listening, I'm not really focused on what the person's saying, because I'm trying to think about what I'm going to say next, or conversely, you know, I think I know what they're going to say next, and I want to interrupt them and say, oh, I know what you're going to say, and move the conversation on. So I find that really quite challenging to sort of monitor my own self, and I find that I've just got to sort of zip it. Do you have any tips that you for dealing with that situation, or have you just like learned how to, you know, just keep quiet when somebody's talking?
Yeah, you know, I think you can never really prepare yourself or where you're going to go in a conversation. But I mean, try and do your research before you go and see the client. Find out about their background, learn about their industry, and have at least 3 to 5 questions prepared.
Right, that's
when you go there. So when I go, when I'm chatting with somebody, I mean, you know, consulting with somebody, I make sure that I've done my research.
Right.
And that I had some, you know, questions to start off with, but I don't rely on those questions. Those are just something to start with, because oftentimes you'll just be led down another path, and you've got to follow your instinct and continue down that path. But yeah, so
no, that's
the other thing is I think that sometimes we're afraid of silence. And that everyone gets kind of awkward about it sometimes, but no, there's so much power in pausing, and if you once you feel comfortable with that, you can do anything, and so it just allows you to collect your thoughts and allows, you know, the other person to continue on with what they were saying. You know, they could be saying something so important, but because you've interrupted them, you know, they've lost that train of thought. So yeah, use the power of pause.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Okay, thank you. So so listening, I mean, it sounds like to me like there's quite a bit of leadership that comes into this. You know, when you're a business advisor, you need to really think about how you lead and leadership skills in general. What are the sorts of leadership skills that business advisors need, do you think?
Oh, there's so many.
Big question, I know.
Yeah, just knowing when to lead and when to hold back. You know, and being creative and innovative is really important as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Knowing when to be directive and when to facilitate. So sometimes I can, one of the biggest things that I have to identify when I'm in a project, you know, doing a project or working with a client, is that to let them take the lead, but sometimes you just got to make an executive call and take the reins. And I think you'll know when to do that. So follow your intuition.
Yeah. I think what you're talking about there is kind of, I think we mentioned it a little bit at our last webinar. We're talking a little bit about the sort of push and pull nature of when you're coaching and mentoring and advising. You know, you need to know when to take the lead and be quite directive with your clients. And then you also need to know conversely, you know, when you, so that's kind of like the pull side of it, but you also need to know conversely when you need to push them or maybe facilitate them more to finding the solution for themselves. So there's that kind of directive angle, and then there's the facilitating angle of leadership but both are equally important, I guess. And you need to understand when to take that back seat sometimes. Yeah, so it's quite interesting.
Yeah, sure. You always want to, you know, I prefer to be a facilitator most of the time because I want the client to be to be the driver, really, of their own, you know, of their own business and how they want it to be projected. But there are times when I do switch to being directive, and I adopt a firmer approach, and that's especially when it comes to things like PR crises. For example, you know, a lot of my clients I have not had experience in dealing with a media crisis, so I lean on my experiences in helping to navigate people and organizations through like, for example, the last year we went, or was it the year before? We went through the measles crisis, and we went through and going through COVID. There's a lot of crisis, you know, crisis management that needs to go on, and making sure that your messaging is not tone deaf, but it's still relaying the messages that need to reach the people. So sometimes you've got to put your foot down and say, this is how we're going, you know, this is how it's going to be done because of the evidence that has been used before and your experiences to be able to help them through that crisis. So yeah.
Yeah. So that's a real leadership skill, isn't it? Knowing when to be directive and when to facilitate. And that's a great example, you know, like when you're in crisis mode, you've just got to be out there. There's no facilitating required. You just tell them what it is, what you've got to do. Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah, because it's very urgent. So you've got to act on the spot.
And I suppose, you know, you've got there about being self-aware and self-regulating, you know, that's kind of like that discipline thing. You know, that's a real leadership skill, isn't it? You know, how you manage yourself and, you know, perhaps being aware of your own biases and preconceived ideas. That is a leadership skill, isn't it? I guess we all have unconscious biases that we carry around that we're completely unaware of, otherwise they wouldn't be unconscious, of course. And yet, if we're to develop empathy, then, you know, perhaps one of the most important things that we can do is to reflect on our own biases and the judgments that we make without really considering others' perspectives. Perhaps you can talk us through some of those areas where we are often, you know, quite unaware that we're biased. I mean, there are some areas in business that we tend to have unconscious biases about. Perhaps I can get you to talk us through those.
Sure. Yeah, there are there's different types of unconscious biases we need to address, and once we I think the first thing that we need to do is acknowledge that we all have these biases, and that's how our worldviews are sometimes informed. So did you want me to go through the different kinds of biases that
I think that would be really useful? Yeah, I mean, I quite like this slide because it kind of stops you and gets you thinking, actually, you know, what do I do about that? Like, you know, I look at that sort of beauty bias. I think we all do this. You know, we make assumptions based on people's appearances, don't we? And, you know, whilst I think appearances are important when you were at work, you know, like for professionalism, sometimes we can also make assumptions about someone's capabilities based on the way that they look, or perhaps even their personality based on the way that they look. And sometimes that's wrong. So I think like that.
Yeah.
beauty or appearance bias is quite an important one.
Yeah, absolutely. I can think of a very recent experience where I was interviewing somebody, getting some content ready, and it was for a women's International Women's Day, and one of the women worked in fisheries, and she, she's openly, a heavy-set woman, and she's very open in talking about that. But I never bothered to ask her whether she goes out into the field, because I just assumed that she, because of her weight, she wasn't going to be diving into the water and going, But as it turns out, yes, she does. She that was one of the best parts of the story, was talking about how she never lets her weight stop her from going out into the field, diving into the ocean, and taking stock of coral and everything. And we actually got like photos, beautiful photos and powerful photos of her in the water despite her weight. So if you let your unconscious biases get in the way, sometimes you miss the beautiful story that's actually waiting to be revealed. The other thing that I just wanted to point out is I have been also been judged based on some, an unconscious bias of somebody else. For example, I work in agriculture. So coming from, I've had a background in journalism, marketing, and the beauty industry. So I have been consistently, always I'm a person who's always well presented, because, in order to get the business, you got to look the business, and that has been instilled in me since I was a kid. So this is something that's transferred into wherever I work in. And so sometimes when I'm in the field, I'm out there in the farm, and I'm interviewing people. It's hot, it's sweaty. You're getting bitten by mosquitoes, and when you walk in and you've still got your makeup on, you're impeccably dressed, people just think that you're not capable of keeping up with them in the farm or whatever. But usually, I always persist. And and I always end up proving them wrong, because once they see that I'm capable of telling these stories, earn their trust, and it's smooth sailing from then on. It's always very rewarding.
Yeah. So some of the other this slide shows, like the affinity bias. That's kind of when we unconsciously favor someone who perhaps shares qualities, or they look like ourselves, or they appear similar to ourselves. So people who seem similar, we sometimes, our unconscious bias, we sometimes get confused, and we think that because they look like us, or they share a similar viewpoint, that they're a shared fit, and so we prefer them over somebody else. Like this often happens in recruitment, where you think somebody's going to fit in culturally really well, and that is an important aspect of business, but sometimes we have an unconscious bias about that. We think that because they sound like us, they look like us, and they're kind of the same, that they're the right person to employ, and that can sometimes be wrong. So that affinity bias, I think, is it happens quite a lot. I mean, I recognize myself being drawn towards certain people when I recruit people, and I can see it's the people that I think reflect, someone that I can get on with, someone similar to me.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's what you call the law of attraction, Barbara. Like attracts like.
Yeah.
But that I don't think you should beat yourself up about that, but just be aware that it's there, and just like everything else, you got to be careful with what you wish, because if you're a strong-willed and assertive person, sometimes hiring people of the same personality traits is going to be counterproductive.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes you need somebody who's completely different. Hey, like diversity,
Yeah.
new ideas and new ways of working. So it's quite interesting, you know, like for a firm, for a company, really interesting to have those differences. And in fact, sometimes a little bit of conflict can actually be quite useful.
Yeah, definitely. But also like setting guidelines for yourself and for the entire, you know, organization, identifying, you know, possible biases. I mean, you know, affinity ones, you know, just choosing people who are like you, you know, so that can address so many things. Gender inequality, racial inequality. So that's a very important thing to get right.
Yeah, yeah. And then I see that you've got there like the attribution bias and confirmation bias. And so like that attribution bias, that's kind of like saying when somebody does something well, we often think, oh, well, you know, they've done that well because they're lucky, or, you know, because they've got everything that they need, and, you know, so of course they did it well. Whereas when they do something badly or they perform poorly, we often judge them harshly, and then we blame the person for it. But, you know, in reality, when something goes well or not so well, it's usually a whole range of factors. It's not just caused by somebody's attributes. It's a whole range of cause and effect things. And then the confirmation bias, that's often, you know, when we tend to form an opinion about someone, perhaps in the first few minutes of meeting them, and then we seek evidence to back up that original opinion that we have instead of keeping an open mind. And I think, you know, I think we do that quite a lot. Hey, you do make a first impression of somebody, and then constantly, you know, everything you do, you keep saying, oh, well, yeah, I knew that about them. I knew that straight away from the off, and you look for evidence to support that original argument. That's quite interesting that we do that. Hey.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I think that conformity bias, you know, that's kind of groupthink, really, isn't it? That when you, and I suppose that kind of happens when you've got that bias towards having people the same as you in your organization, then you kind of, you know, have that conformity thing going on, and so everybody gets into this groupthink way of working, and so if you've got a different point of view, it makes it really difficult to voice your different point of view when everybody else thinks the same. So often we have a bias towards conforming. You know, it's the right thing to conform to what everybody else thinks. It's and that's not necessarily right.
No, I can't say that I have that bias. Conformity is the death of creativity. So I have a hard one with that, and groupthink is probably something that happens a lot, and you're never going to be innovative or think your way out of a problem. Yeah, so that's not one of my favorite ones. But yeah, go ahead, Barbara.
Like, well, I said those last two, you know, the horns effect and the halo effect. That in some ways, I think that like the horns effect, what they're saying there is that you know, when you focus on one negative aspect about one person, and then that clouds up. Or conversely, when our judgment is clouded by one positive thing or a positive thing that someone's done, and then, you know, we become biased about that. And I mean, I've found in organizations we often put our CEOs, for example, up on a pedestal, you know, or either they can do no wrong or they can't do anything right. But often I found that that halo effect happens with CEOs, where they're put up on a pedestal, and then we have really high expectations of them because they're the leader of our organization, and we put a little halo on them, and we automatically do that without even thinking. And then I've seen so many leaders of businesses who have then fallen off that pedestal because they've then had a big crash landing and done something really wrong, and we never saw it coming because we've had this halo on them, thinking that they're so perfect for so long that of course we never saw it coming. So, you know, those are I really like that slide, because I think, you know, it does kind of take you to task on some of the thinking that we have.
Yeah.
It.
Yeah, it really shines a light on some of the behaviors that, that we don't really want to admit to. But yeah, those are really important to be aware of. And when as you were speaking, I just started thinking that empathy plays a big, huge part in being able to neutralize these biases and putting yourselves in the shoe of the other person. So that's very important.
So these are some of the typical places. Hey, do you want to just talk through, how our biases, our unconscious biases, can show up in the workplace? You can just talk through some of those.
How they can show up in the workplace.
Yeah, like what it means, typically where the places are that it happens.
Well, it can happen anywhere, but it can happen everywhere, especially when recruiting people. You tend to recruit people who are like you or hold the same values as you, and you could be missing out on somebody completely dynamic who will bring something super valuable to your organization.
Yeah, and I've seen it actually in promotion as well. Like I've seen an organisation that only promotes men, for example, because they're seen as being the more capable, but that's because there's an unconscious bias about the women that worked for that organisation. And even remuneration, I've seen some organisations where only the men got increases in salary and the women didn't, and that was because they were perceived to be the breadwinner in their family, and so they deserved it more than the women. And I mean, thankfully, I think some of that thinking doesn't really happen anymore, but I have experienced that in the past with some organisations. So yeah, and type of work. I mean, I've had a client in the horticulture sector, for example, who only wanted to recruit men because they thought that they were they were strong and they could do the fruit picking, for example, and they didn't think that women would be able to do it. But in actual fact, and I did manage to persuade them at one stage to take on some women, and in actual fact, they found those women were perhaps not quite as strong, but certainly they had the same stamina, if not more, than the men, and they were certainly as disciplined, more, and actually they were more diligent than their male counterparts. And so as a consequence, that company actually shifted their attitude completely, and now they actually seek out women for fruit picking, even though they might not be as strong as men. They've found that they're really great workers for that job. So yeah, it's quite interesting. Our preconceived ideas about what different genders can do is often an unconscious bias that we carry.
Yeah, that's very true. I'm trying to think in my mind like where I've come across this. The only I can't really think. I guess I've just always walked into a place like I owned it, so I can't really remember where it's happened to me. But I just I mean, going back to what I said about being in the doing agriculture communications, a lot of people think that, well, in Samoa especially, that women, don't do the work of men. So sometimes, I wouldn't say it stopped me from ever going into places where, it's considered more a man's job, but definitely gotten a few raised eyebrows because of it. So, so you just gotta rise above it. What do you think, Barbara? How did you get over that?
Well, I think I think you're right. It's about thinking of different perspectives and thinking outside the box, and just trying new things when you become aware of it. But I mean, I go back to, you know, this slide. I think if we can constantly think about and test ourselves, you know, what might be my bias that I'm not aware of? What do I do in these situations, or are there any of these areas that I could be carrying an unconscious bias about? So you're actually shifting them from the unconscious to the conscious when you think through all of those boxes there. I think that's one way that you can tackle it. So just thinking about that, another area, like a really key skill for business advisors is around influence and persuasion, and you mentioned this before. So, you know, as a business advisor, you really need to be able to influence and persuade our clients to take certain actions that you might know are right for the business, but sometimes the owners haven't, you know, perhaps got that yet, or perhaps they're scared to make a change, or they think it's too big a leap, you know, to get into something new. So, you know, perhaps you can share with us some of your experiences when you've really needed to influence clients to act or do something different. You know, what did you do? And perhaps if you can sort of tell us, you know, whether the things on this slide were some of the things that you relied on to influence and persuade your clients.
Sure. I can think of a few instances where I've had to influence and persuade a client, and yeah, again, you've got to go back to customer care, having empathy and understanding others' perspectives. So always like take it back to the client and you know, reassure them that you're doing this for them, and that you're on their side, and you know, you can see a better way of doing things. I can think of a time last year where I was helping a client, a hotelier, with a major event, and it was something that hadn't been done before, so it was completely new. But I had some ideas about how it would, you know, pan out. But of course, you know, when it comes to, like, you know, there's costs involved and things like that, there's always a little hesitancy to spend too much money, or to, you know, but for me, I could see that there was a way, you know, obviously a way where you could cut costs, and, you know, and that you didn't have to sacrifice, you know, doing a really great job by being too scared. So I just was, you know, I think if you show your client that you've done your research and that you're taking ownership of a project, they're more inclined to trust you in walking down an unknown path. So part of that is, yeah, just managing that relationship with the client, always ensuring that you're in constant consultation with them. I always went the extra mile, and I, you know, to sometimes you have to appeal to their senses. So while I've given them an idea, it's just like they can't see it. So I would go over and beyond my duty and create like a mock-up, you know, a design brief, to pitch to them, to show them. And then, you know, once they see it, you know, like, once you show them what you see, then that's one way to gain credibility and be able to influence them to take a risk, or to do something that they haven't done before. And also I invite them to input on everything, even if they don't need to, or if they don't want to. I just make sure that I'm really consistent, and I email them, message them, send, you know, I utilize everything, WhatsApp, Messenger, email. So they always know that they're in the loop of things, you know, they're being kept in the loop. Yeah, and just
getting their consultation, getting their feedback.
Yeah, that you respect. You're showing them that you respect them, that you're listening to them, that you're reliable, and that you're doing things on time. Also, the other thing is like, you know, I always model, you know, if I feel if I'm on time, if I am proactive and I look the part, that means like, you know, even just little things like showing up, I make sure that, you know, I don't show up in my pajamas or something like that, you know. You know, I really respect them, and so that means that I put a lot of effort into my presentation, not just personal presentation, but in everything that I do.
So you kind of model.
And yeah. Sorry, what was that, Barbara?
You kind of model the way. You model, and you influence through modeling the way, through kind of showing them how you behave, and so they can follow suit in a way. So you show them a way effectively.
Sure, and you show them that, you know, you have a high standard, and once they see that, then they're more apt to try to meet that standard as well. So you're setting the tone, basically.
And that's kind of a leadership skill as well, isn't it? And influence and persuasion is certainly, you know, that's a leadership skill. I quite like some of the things that Dale Carnegie, who wrote, he wrote that book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, and that was way back in the 1930s. And I think, you know, some of the things that you're talking about and what we've got captured on this slide, it kind of captures all the points that you're making about influence. And you know, what you're saying is, like, you have to have empathy for influence to happen. You have to look the part. You've got to look credible. You've got to be reliable. You've got to do what you say. You've got to be friendly. You know, all of those things have to be there. You've got to have those things in place. Listening skills, respect, and also, you know, he kind of pointed out a way of handling people, and then a way to get people to like you, and then you know, finally to get them to influence you. And I found it quite interesting how, you know, he spoke about, you know, don't complain. You know, don't complain about things. If you want people to like you and you want to handle them well, then don't complain. Always be honest, and see things from others' perspective. So exactly what you're saying about empathy. And then, you know, you've got at the top there about how to make people like you. You know, be interested in them. You know, not talking about yourself, but talking about the other person. Yes. Remembering their name, being a good listener. You know, all of those ways. I mean, to me, I kind of look at that and I think, oh, it's actually quite manipulative, you know. Certainly if you're going to use it for unscrupulous means, then it could be seen as being quite manipulative. But actually, these are the things that influence us, aren't they? It is how somebody looks. It's how they treat us. It's how they model the way. It's all of those things. And then he also spoke about, you know, avoiding arguments. You know, don't get into an argument with them. Make sure you always respect the other person's opinion, and even go so far as to admit you're wrong when, you know, perhaps even when you think you're right. So those are the ways that you influence people. So I mean, I think even back in the 1930s, they knew all this stuff that is still really relevant today. So that's quite interesting.
No, you really do have to put your ego aside sometimes, you know. Usually I always think that I'm, you know, most of the time I'm on point with, you know, any designs or any content that I come up with. But if I get feedback from a client and they're not happy about it, or that I got it wrong, you know, I would never disagree with them, because they're the client, and you're communicating their messages. So I always respect their feedback, whether it's negative or positive, and I really do take it on board. And that's something that my clients do appreciate, is that the next time they do see a difference, that I have taken their thoughts and their feedback on board. Because what's the point of, you know, having a working relationship with those people if you're not going to listen to what they want? At the end of the day, it's about them.
Yeah, I think that's probably the most important point when it comes to influence. So do you reckon there's a difference between influence and persuasion?
I think they're similar. You need to have, you know, influence in order to persuade.
Yeah, it's probably that thing again. Hey, it's like a continuum of maybe influence is more facilitating and it's more subtle and it's about
Yeah.
guides. Being persuasive is perhaps a bit more of a selling skill and it's a little bit more directive and a little bit harder. But you certainly need both, hey, when you're a business advisor. Along
For
with
sure.
a persuasive and selling and another lot of advisory skills. So yeah.
Yeah, no, they're definitely a good balance. Like you say, you know, influence is about, you know, leadership and your reputation and all of those things. And persuasion is, yeah, like you say, more directive. It's a hard sell, and you've got an outcome in mind, and you're being firm about it.
Yeah, cool. Okay, hey, I'm just going to pause for a moment, and I'm really mindful as well that we are running a little bit behind time. But I noticed that we've had a couple of comments come in here from Kevin, so thank you for those. So Kevin has made a comment. He said, my first old school sales manager way back in 1983 used to say you have 2 eyes, 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use them in that proportion. That's great advice, Kevin. Thank you. And from Cook Islands, we've got those 8 influencing tips. Sound like a good marriage advice too. Thank you. Any other comments or questions on what we've covered so far? Nicely presented. Thanks, Ranjil. Okay, hey, well, look, I'm going to move on because we've got another 3 topics to cover, 3 little topics to cover off. So we're running a little bit behind. So the next one we're going to talk about is presenting skills. And I guess, Liz, for you in your line of work, you've probably had to give a few presentations to large groups of people over the time that you've been involved in comms. So when business advisors need to present to large audiences, what sort of advice, what tips can you share with them for how they need to do that?
What tips and advice? Well, you know, preparation. So, for example, I've been asked to present in a number of different environments, and each time I'm always nervous. Like, it doesn't even matter how many times I've done this before, I'm always going to be nervous.
Yeah.
So
I can relate to that.
Yeah. So but I think if you can like and this is a very difficult one for me because I'm a very instinctive person, so it's really hard for me to like even put my thoughts down and organizing them, but you've got to force yourself to do it. So that's how you set up the foundation of your presentation, sequencing your information and all that stuff. But when you're actually giving a presentation, here's my advice on trying to get rid of the nerves is, I imagine that I'm talking to my friends, not just any friends. I'm talking about, you know, my like-minded friends, the ones that you talk about your ideas with and concepts. Because once I do that, I find that everything about me changes. I'm being more authentic. I'm clearer, more concise. I'm relaxed. I'm not falling over my words or forgetting things. And also my passion comes through the presentation as well. And that usually is the winning thing for people, is that they need to feel, you know, once they feel that you believe in it, they're obviously going to believe in it as well. So some things just to be wary of, like when you're giving a presentation, other than making sure that you created a beautiful presentation of visually appealing slides, is just watch your speed, how you're talking, and make sure that everything flows well, and also make a point to connect with your audience, like, you know, literally looking in their eyes. I know sometimes if you've got like note cards and you're reading off of them, just make a conscious effort to look up and look into the eyes of your audience.
That's Great advice. And even you can do that with a large audience too, can't you? Just by kind of looking across at an area in a room, it makes people feel like you're looking at them, and then they engage so much more. Now, that's really great advice. I've just got a little model that I'd quite like to share as well in terms of that preparation that you spoke about, preparing for your presentation, where you say what becomes really important. So this is kind of based on the Minto pyramid, and it really helps to get that flow right and organize your thoughts and put things in the right place. So I mean, how this works is, so you've got your presentation topic, let's say it's on communication skills. So, you might introduce into your speech, say, an interest grabber. So it must be, today I'm going to talk about communication skills, then you'll tell them like maybe a joke or a funny story or an interesting fact, and that just grabs their interest, or it connects you through to what you're going to say. So then what I do is I'd introduce the subtopics, if you like, of what I'm going to say. So, and typically I'd like leave it at 3 subtopics or 4 at the most, because that's what people can remember. So today I'm going to talk to you about A, B, and C. So then I'd run through those subtopics. So subtopic A, or 1, I'm going to tell you, so there's this, and this about that topic, and then I'd summarize it. So, I've told you about A, B, and C. Then I'd go on to the next one. So I'd talk about subtopic 2, and then summarize, go through that, summarize it, do the same for 3, and then 4 if I had another subtopic. And then at the end of going through all of that information, I would summarize and say, right, okay, so I've told you about A, B, and C, all these 3 topics, and now the synthesis, this is what that all means. And then over again. So effectively, I'm kind of organizing my thoughts into those little boxes, and I'm writing in those boxes what I'm going to say where, to make sure that it all makes sense. Because sometimes you get one thought that you think fits in one topic, but actually it's another. So it really helps to sort of situate them in the right place. But effectively, in terms of planning for your presentation, what you need to do is you need to kind of tell them what you're going to tell them. Then you need to tell them, and then you need to tell them what you've told them. So, that's kind of what I've based my little planner on.
Yeah, it's perfect.
I find that quite a useful thing, and I've used that time and time again. So, do you use something similar when you plan for a presentation, Liz?
Yeah, no, definitely. What you've said is absolutely right, especially when in communications is repetition is key. I remember someone telling me that in order for you to remember somebody's name, you need to have heard it 7 times throughout the day for you to remember it. And sometimes there's so much information we're bombarded with information every single day now, especially that we have social media. So doing it that way that you've described is such a good way to just have the key messages be remembered by your audience. So this is I 100% endorse that. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Hey, Monica, I'm really mindful that we are a little bit over time, and we've still got another couple of topics. So I completely understand if people need to leave, but let's move on otherwise to our next topic, which is on effective writing. And obviously this is right in your area of expertise, Liz. So as a content writer, what tips can you give business advisors for ensuring that their written content is effective?
Sure. Just that saying, keep it simple, stupid, KISS, that the acronym, keep it simple, stupid. So, always simplify. The first thing that you would clarify is what sort of writing or content creation you might need or do.
Well, that's true. I'm not actually entirely sure what sort of writing business advisors do, but I'm sort of thinking, obviously emails, proposals, maybe social media. People might want to pop in the chat box actually what sort of writing they need to do, and any challenges that they might have with that. So yeah, feel free to pop something in the chat box. But yeah, I'm kind of thinking emails, proposals, social media posts, maybe web
content, press releases, things like that.
stuff.
One really important thing that everyone should do, regardless of what content is being produced, is research. Google is your friend. A journalist that a very well-known journalist I interviewed maybe 3 years ago gave me, 4 years ago, he gave me some advice that has literally changed my life. He said to me, nothing is original. So this has been a really valuable, because when you have an idea that you haven't attempted before and you're trying to put it out on paper or whatever kind of content you're doing, the chances are someone else has already done it before. So Google is your best friend. Find it, localize it, and then tell it in your own voice.
Yeah.
Be sure to use right terminology, jargon, and use pictures and infographics to illustrate what you're trying to say, for effective communications.
Yeah. That makes sense. So these are a few reminders before you put pen to paper, I suppose, of what what you need to think about. Yeah. So do you want to just talk us through that, because you use this kind of approach as well, don't you?
Absolutely, especially when it comes to press releases. This is, and also content marketing. I have to think of these things, because once what the why and who you're writing it for will help you immensely in focusing and in what you're writing, because sometimes you can just think of too many things. Well, once you nail down your primary audience and the purpose of what you're writing it for, you can't go wrong. You can't go off on a tangent.
Yeah. And that being summarizing that in one sentence is sometimes really helpful before you put pen to paper, just to
sure. Absolutely, and keep your sentences short. Oh, actually, it's our next. So.
Yeah, and I think with this one, like sometimes we don't always appreciate that there are other perspectives that could be out there. So that empathy thing comes in again with those guidelines that you've got down there. You've got to think, how might somebody else see this? Maybe what I've written, there's another way of reading it to what I intended. So, double checking, or even getting somebody else to double check that for you is really helpful. You've also got that sort of quick check of what you do afterwards, and I suppose for that last point, thinking about how else it might be read is really important. And so going away and coming back with fresh eyes is quite an important check, isn't it, when you review what you've written? So do you want to just take us through those things that you do when you check what you've written?
Yes, it's so important to go away and come back after you've spent hours. I sometimes spend hours writing just one thing, just one piece. So it's good to go away, come back with fresh eyes, because then you actually can see where you might edit or omit some things that are unnecessary. And then also using an active voice. Don't use long sentences. I always try to keep my sentences my paragraphs no more than 2 to 4 sentences. And I make sure that there's 1 point per sentence. Otherwise, you're just going to confuse your audience or your reader. Also, when I'm one thing that you've got to be really diligent with when you're writing, this is just before all of this, the quick check, you have to make sure that you don't try and edit while you're writing. Just write freely.
Oh, I'm so guilty.
Yeah, we both are. Like I I should probably take my own advice. But try your hardest to just get all your ideas, just all of just, you know, out on the paper, even if it doesn't make any sense, and save the editing for later. That's really, really important. Don't judge yourself while you're writing. So anyways, back to the editing part. The other thing that I do once I go through the story, and this is actually really hard for me, and someone actually described it as killing your darlings, and that means killing all the adjectives. So there's nothing wrong with using adjectives or descriptive words, but sometimes, you know, I can get a little, you know, go a little bit crazy with my descriptive words, and using too many adjectives actually really add little to your writing. And what you want to focus on is you want to make sure your reader arrives to the point that you're trying to make as swiftly and quickly as possible. So getting rid of those, those describing words can be. Do you know what I'm just talking about, Barbara? Like being too descriptive.
Again, what you're saying really it's understanding, putting yourself in the shoes of the reader. You know, like using all of those adjectives and beautiful flowery words, and you might love being really descriptive, but actually the reader just wants to get it read as soon as possible.
Yeah, he wants to arrive. He or she wants to arrive at the point, like, quickly. Sometimes even when I'm reading something and the author is just going on and on and on, I will just switch off and get annoyed because I'm not arriving to the purpose of the article as quickly as possible. So keep that in mind, that, you know, put yourself in the shoes of the reader. The other thing is, and this is a really good piece of advice that someone gave me, which I use all the time, and that's the words which and that. They are pretty much redundant, and most of the time when you're going back and trying to reduce the word count, you can actually get rid of the which and that, and still make sense. The other thing is using the word this.
Your sentence, isn't it? You're kind of making your sentence bigger. You're making more than one point. When you put that or which in, then you're making a sentence longer.
Oh yeah, totally. And it's, again, you're not arriving to your purpose fast enough to, I'm sorry, your point. Also, the using this, don't start a sentence with this. For example, because and I'm guilty of this as well. I've done this just this week, actually, using this a lot. So for example, the sentence, using Xero to produce your monthly financial reports is a great way to analyze business performance. Full stop. This means you know exactly where you're at. When you put this at the beginning of a sentence, you confuse the reader. Because which this are we referring to? Are we using Xero, producing monthly reports, or analyzing business performance? Putting this at the beginning of a sentence can actually make things more vague and confuse the reader. So just remember that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Checking punctuation is so important. I mean, gosh, the power of a comma can totally change the meaning.
I like that little example that you've got there, you know, like eats, shoots and leaves. If there was a comma in there, they eat, the panda is going to eat, shoot and leave, as in fire a gun, shoot. Or if you take it out, it eats, shoots and leaves, as in it eats, leaves. I can't explain it now.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so cool. I like that. Oh, that's great. Okay. So shall we move on to our last topic of the day, which is probably the hardest one, and it's about when you need courage to communicate. So courageous communication, it is about those challenging times that we all have to have from time to time. Perhaps it's a challenge because you've got to say something that's going to be hard for someone to hear, or maybe it's a challenging conversation because you feel ashamed of something you've done, so you need a bit of courage to actually admit to it, or maybe you need courage because you know that you've got that different point of view in the room, or maybe another time might be when you don't want to lose control of your emotions. So I suppose there's lots of difficult situations that could arise in a work setting when you really need courage to say something. And in many ways, those times are those are the times when we can really add value as a business advisor or a leader in an organization. So Liz, perhaps you can share some of your experiences of when you've needed some courage and how you've prepared yourself for that challenge of stepping up and taking that courage to have that difficult conversation.
Yeah, that you're going to come across that all the time. And yeah, especially about hurting, you always, again, that empathy thing, you're worried about offending or hurting the client's feelings or anyone's feelings. If you're going to give them some, feedback that's really important to the success of their business. But I think, just looking at all those points of being courageous, giving negative feedback, admitting a mistake, expressing strong feelings, putting forward a new idea, talking about sensitive issues, and letting someone know you care. I think it's so important to go back to your values, your own values, about why, that frame what you do and how you live your life. So for example, for me, it's really important that I always do everything authentically, and that if something does not align with my values or my principles, I have to address it. So sometimes that even means walking away from something.
Yeah.
And I've had to do that a couple of times because it really didn't, an organization or a leader, didn't, the work that they wanted wasn't going to, I wouldn't have been able to sleep at night, basically, you gotta stick to your guns and stick to your values. And I have no problem admitting a mistake, because I'm smart enough to know that mistakes are meant to be made for a reason. So once you admitting a mistake or saying sorry is actually, for me, I feel like it's getting that out of the way, acknowledging it so that we can move forward. And once you actually keep your mind on the ball and the outcome, you're going to have the courage to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's great advice. I've just got a little feedback template that I kind of use, or a technique, I suppose, that I often use. I find it quite useful for providing feedback, both when you want to, perhaps praise someone for doing something well, so give them some positive reinforcement, or for giving them some feedback for improvement. And I quite like this little model because it kind of helps you focus on the person's behavior and then the consequences of that behavior, rather than making it personal or associating it with them as a person and being more emotive. So the model, I call it the STAR feedback, and basically it's it stands for situation, task, action and result. And so how you use it is you sort of say, right, what was the situation, what was the task, what was the action, and what was the result? So it's quite useful to say something like, as an example, so remember yesterday when you were talking to the client about their tax return, so what was the task? You had to go over it with them and get them to sign it off. So, what was the action? So you checked it, and then you reminded them that the tax was due tomorrow, and what was the result. And so as a result, they paid it on time and they didn't incur a penalty. So, you know, you can use it very simply by starting off your sentences with those words. Remember when, what you were doing, the action you took, and as a result. So you can also use the same model for feedback for improvement, but this time you just add on an extra A and an extra A for alternative action and an extra R for alternative results. So, you know, remember yesterday when you were talking to the client about their tax return, you had to go over it with them and get them to sign it off. You checked it and then also reminded them that their tax was due tomorrow. Perhaps, here's the alternative, perhaps if you had also followed up with an email on the day, then maybe, so the alternative result, then maybe they would have remembered to pay their tax and they wouldn't have received a penalty for the late payment. So there's just a little silly example of how you might use that little feedback. But what I quite like this model because it addresses the behavior, as I say, rather than labeling the person. So, you know, you're not saying, oh, look, you were homeless. You didn't remind them. You've been really specific about what it is they did and what they didn't do and what the consequence of that was. So I find this quite a useful little checklist model. So quite a little useful feedback model. And then, but there is a checklist that goes with it as well. And that checklist involves things like, you know, why are you actually giving the feedback in the first place? Like, are you doing it because you want to give that person some useful feedback that's going to be helpful for them, or actually are you really doing it because it makes you feel better? And you know, sometimes we do that, we give feedback because it makes us feel better. So I think we have to watch that that's not our reason for giving feedback. Next thing, of course, is it has to be timely. Like, it's no good giving feedback, particularly feedback for improvement, if it's like 3 months after the event that happened. Also needs to be in private. And as I say, you know, you address the behavior, not the person, and then you own it. You know, these are your observations, it's your feedback. It's not, oh, somebody else told me to tell you this. It's your stuff, so you own it. So I quite like that little model. I find it quite a useful way of being able to professionally give somebody the feedback. So yeah, anyway, just thought I'd share that as well. Liz, have you got any other comments that you'd like to add around courageous communication? Very important skill.
I think what you said there is, you know, gives a clear, you know, method of going through that process. So no, that's really valuable, Barbara. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
No, thank you very much, Liz. I mean, I think your insights and your expertise has been great. And, you know, we've still got many people, I mean, I know we've gone over time, but we've still got many people who have obviously really enjoyed and valued this webinar today. So thanks, everyone, for sticking with us, even though we're way over.
Thank you, everyone.
I do want to share with people, if you've got any other questions or comments that you'd like to make, then please do so. Use the chat box. Also, up in the chat box, and might just ask Sandra if she can post it again. We've got a little poll, a little questionnaire for you to give us some feedback on this webinar. We'd really appreciate that if you can. But that's up in the chat box now, if you can just click on that link. But I think, you know, for me, whilst people might be making some comments and questions, perhaps I can just say, you know, for me, as a business advisor, you know, I think, you know, I often tend to think about the technical skills that I need to advise clients, but, you know, actually, it's our deep understanding of our clients, it's our communication skills, it's our rapport, you know, the way that we build that rapport and the way that we connect with our clients, and then get to really understand their needs. You know, that's what being a business advisor is all about. That's probably the most important skill that we need as business advisors. And, you know, I mean, it's great if it's already in your nature to be naturally curious, naturally empathetic, and to be creative. But if you're not born with those traits, then it's great to hear that you can actually learn and develop these attributes through a little bit of conscious effort and deliberate actions and some deliberate learning. So Liz, I'd really like to thank you for sharing your expertise and your knowledge with us today, because I think, that's been absolutely fabulous for people to really understand what the communication skills are that we need as business advisors. So, thank you so much. And perhaps I can just hand over to you as well, Liz, to see if you've got any last thoughts or final thoughts and summary of the webinar, and then I'll just go and check the questions. Thank you.
Oh no, I just want to thank everyone for listening, and hopefully you found some value in some of that. Please do feel free to email me any further questions, or I'm happy to help and go through them with you. Thank you so much, Barbara, for this awesome opportunity. I was really excited when you contacted me, because I feel that this is a field that is going to be really highly, very valuable in the present and in the future of any business. So thanks again.
Thank you. No, that's great. Thanks. And thank you everyone for joining us. I can see we've got a couple of comments in there, and actually there's one, Kevin, I'd like to pick up on yours. You've said about a wombat that eats roots and shoots and leaves. I didn't realise it was a rude saying in Australia, but I can see where it's coming from. So thank you for that. It just goes to show that I didn't think of a different perspective. And Tyrone, you've got a question for Liz there. So you're also New Zealand, from New Zealand, and New Zealand-born Samoan, now resident in Samoa. You don't have the language skills in making a presentation. The customs and protocols, yes, that's so true. And being aware of a prayer to begin with, and honorifics. Oh, that is such an important point. And being able to deal with your audience with the right titles, etc. If one does not have these skills personally, one could lose some of your audience. How do you overcome this language issue and customs issue? That is so important, and thank you so much, Tyrone, for raising that. I know I'm really challenged with that as well. Liz, have you got any suggestions for that?
You just got to do your research. For example, while I was writing, coming across this issue, my first experience was while working in the Samoa Observer. It was really important that titles, you got the titles right. You could start a war if you don't get it right, and also it's a respect thing. Those people have earned it. So that took a lot of getting used to. But then now it's become like a part of me. So when I'm writing emails or writing speeches, I make sure that I know who's going to be there,
right?
What their Matai title is. And Samoa is a very small place. It's very easy to find this information. And also, I've identified people. As soon as I came to Samoa, I went looking for the people that I knew that I needed to be able to do, to get help from, especially for cultural protocols and things like that. I have a go-to person that I have check over my writing, and who continuously teach me about my culture. So for me, it's not going to be like a one wham bam and then that's it. It's an ongoing process of learning, and don't worry about making a mistake. You're going to learn from it. And Samoa will really appreciate it when you're humble and you say to you sorry. So that's how I overcome it. I take it step by step, day by day.
Great advice.
And research is so important.
Getting that person to help you through it, that sounds great. Really good advice. Hey, thank you so much again, Liz. Thank you everyone for joining us today. let me just let you know very briefly that we will be holding another webinar in another month's time. I think it's going to be the 15th of April. So same time, 2 p.m. I noticed that some people did join a little bit late this time, and it's probably because the time's been wrong. So please double check. It's New Zealand time that we start on. So it's 2 p.m. New Zealand time. Now, as I said earlier, this series is about supporting business advisors to develop the skills they need to provide high quality services. And so we invite you to tell us what topics you'd like us to cover. Please, can you complete the short questionnaire that we've got in the chat box now? Just click on that link, and please do tell us any topics you'd like to hear more about. We'd also love to hear your feedback on this webinar series and this webinar in particular, and how best we can support you with professional development. I'd also just like to invite you to unmute your microphones now if you wish, and to stay online if you wish, and have a chat with us. And of course, don't hesitate to reach out to us at BLP at any time if you need any support or advice. But look, that concludes the presentation part of our webinar today. Whaafatai lava, thank you Tomas, Vinaka, Metaki Maata. Looking forward to seeing you all again next month. Bye for now, and as I say, please feel free to have a little chat with us afterwards. We'll be here for another 5 minutes or so, and do put on your cameras, put on your mics, and we'll have a bit of a chat if there's anything else you want to say. Thanks everyone. Cool. Hey, thank you, Liz. That's been great.
Thanks, Barbara.
It's gone rather a long time, a little bit longer than I thought. So I hope people have things to get to. And I can see we've got lots of thanks coming up in the chat boxes. Anybody else?
Thank you, everyone. That was actually this is my first time doing this, so I'm probably going to listen back to it and cringe at everything that I've said and could have done better. But I'm really, really happy for this opportunity to be able to have experience in this. So yeah, how's it going, Kevin? How are you?
Oh, pretty good.
Are you in Savai'i?
I'm in Savai'i at the moment. Yeah, I get more work done in Savai'i.
Oh,
Too many distractions in Apia.
Agree. Can't wait to come back to Savai'i and touch base with you as well, because I also do content writing for Samoa tourism. If there's anything I can help with, I'm happy to help you.
Yeah, well,
get your stories out there.
Yeah, we got a lot on at the moment. So yeah, so hopefully we'll have some good local news to get out and about in the next few weeks.
Yes, it'll be a very interesting few weeks.
We've got a very interesting few weeks because we've got some stuff going on locally, plus we've got some funding stuff happening, and we're actually rolling out our platform in Africa at the moment.
Wow, awesome!
So with the this is a result of the Seed Stars.
Cool.
Last year, so we didn't get beyond the region, but we ended up finding or one of the mentors that we were hooked up with in Europe has quite a few tourism-related businesses throughout Africa and Europe, and he's come on as a business partner in Africa. So we're about to go live in Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, South Africa. And there's one, Rwanda.
Kevin, I don't think I know what you do. What's your business?
Well, I have been the scooter guy here in Samoa, but since the tourists stopped coming, the scooters have been parked and wrapped up in the garage. So,
I've got such a good idea for you. I will contact you because I was invited to cycle around Savai'i just after Christmas. But after I tried cycling, I was thinking, I don't think I can do 6 days of sitting on the seat. But maybe scooter.
It's a ridiculous idea in this weather.
It's horrific, but I think that a scooter tour would be way better.
Yeah, I used to, when the tourists were here, I was doing scooter tours and motorbike tours. And,
But it's about
the back of the bike and doing the swarm of scooters going around.
Yeah.
It was pretty.
But it's about appealing to the locals, right?
No, not really. The locals are too hard on the equipment. I can't afford to. You know what it's like. You see the state of vehicles and
Okay. Well, I hope you'll still let me go on a scooter tour.
I'll make some.
Thanks,
But,
Kevin.
but in
How did you
February,
find the car, Kevin? Was it helpful? Was it useful?
Oh yeah, it was a little bit low key for me. I've been I was in sales and marketing since the early '80s.
Oh, you were expecting a sales focus.
Oh no, I didn't know what to expect, to be honest. But I'm quite happy to sit in and listen, and you always look. And I'm not too old a dog to learn new tricks. So it's nice to sort of get these messages refreshed. They're the same messages that I've been hearing for 40 years, which is good, because what works, and really only the environment that we're working in changes, whether it's digital or physical or video conference or face to face. It's the same fundamentals come through. But busy times, despite the fact that I've not turned a single tala of revenue for we're going on 12 months now. It's just my anniversary. 12 months no revenue, but the other business, which is Booking Samoa, has despite launching just before the shutdown and not doing any operational revenues, we've been doing quite a bit in the background, doing software development and improving the platform, and now sort of rolling out in other parts of the world where they're allowing tourists to move around. So it's all good.
That's great to hear. Yeah. Well, what kind of communications platforms are you using to get your messages out and your content marketing out?
Well, we're not so much. Okay, so we've built a platform, Booking Samoa. It's actually we're in the middle of rebranding it, so it's bookingmy.travel, and it's basically for want of a better word, a one-stop shop for tourism products in the smaller developing tourism sectors. So we're not we don't pretend to be like Booking.com or Expedia or Boken or all the others. What we've focused on, or our driving force, has been the needs and capabilities of the smaller tourism operators, so the beach valet operators, the independent tour guides, small activities and things like that. And to be honest, they've been left behind by the rapid shift to digital platforms. So, apart from people who put up their Facebook pages and, try and get a few friends and whatever else, they really don't have a solid booking platform that's not going to cost them an arm and a leg. So we built that, and we're doing everything from transfers from the airport to car rentals to scooter rentals. What else? Activities, tours, accommodation, restaurant bookings, and our big project over the last 6 months has been developing the new ticketing system for Samoa shipping. So we're also going to be the only place that you can buy a ferry ticket online. So awesome. So we've got lots of different sort of angles that we're working on, but all focused on that sort of low end tourism sector. So you could say that we're all dressed up with no place to go at the moment.
Malo on a city, Kevin.
Oh well, it's all good.
Oh, cool.
Well done, though.
Anyone else have any other comments that they want to make before we finish up?
Well, actually, one more thing. I'm looking for a junior software developer, no skills, learn on the job, all right, and a graphic designer.
There you go.
Do they have to be based, where do they have to be based
In Samoa? In
Okay.
Samoa. So look, if it's a Savai'i person and they're good, you know, I can work with that. Given that if we totally base ourselves in Apia, it means I'm spending 4.5 days a week in Apia, which I really don't want to do.
Yeah.
But if we're sort of splitting between Apia and Savai'i, you know, potentially there's more productivity to be had away from Apia.
What kind of work will the graphic designer be doing?
Well, basically developing the sort of the user interface for our web platform, for our mobile apps. We've got a couple of different mobile apps, and then sort of doing our sort of design stuff for our marketing, which is going to ramp up because we're going to be handling the sort of global marketing for what's going on in Africa, as well as here and around the region. So we're centralizing that. And there's also customer service type activities. So, you know, people put up photos and maybe doing a little bit of Photoshop and, you know, trying to make the customers or the suppliers materials look good and look better. So it's going to be a bit of everything,
Awesome. Yeah, I know a few graphic designers who, it's their side gig. So this might be, you know, something that would interest them.
Yeah, well, we're looking at full time. We've got plenty of work for a designer. So ultimately, we're looking for someone young. It's a bit cheap, but you know, has those skills. I'm a good hack developer, all right, and I'm the last 3 months I've been making excuses about my lack of design skills. People are saying, oh, I don't like that drop shadow, and I don't like those corners and this and that. And I say, hey, I'm not a designer. So we're going to get one and you know, remove that.
Yeah, no, 100%. You need one.
Yeah. So, and I know it's hard. There's not many, you know, there's not much of a pool here in Samoa. You know, back in Australia, when I was running a marketing team, I had 3 or 4 designers, all highly skilled, you know, incredible skills that I'm just in awe of. So I know I'm not going to find that here, but you know, it's more the design eye and sort of a vision as to what they want things to look like, and then you know, we'll learn together as to how to get there. So I've got reasonable Photoshop and Illustrator skills, but nothing that you would want to put out there in public.
Okay, great. I'll put the word out.
Thanks for your comments, Kevin. Nice to have you on board. And Zebra, and I see you've just joined us. Unfortunately, you've missed the webinar. We started at 2 p.m, so you're a little bit late. We'll be able to go on our portal and get the recording of it. So we're going to wrap up now. And yeah, thanks very much for your additional comments, everyone, and for hanging on and staying with us. Yeah, look forward to seeing you again next week. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. See you next time.
Bye.
See you next time. Bye, everyone.